Hello friends, welcome to PulsePoint. In this episode, a glimpse into our bleak future as euthanasia safeguards are found lacking. More pressure to stop transgender participation in sports, this time in the corporate world. The lows of getting high. A new study shows weed affects educational outcomes. And the Disinformation project is dismissed. This and much more to come. Let's get into it. I'm James Williams. Right now in New Zealand, our euthanasia laws are failing. At the same time, there are further attempts to expand the legislation to make choosing death more accessible for more people. As reported in the New Zealand Herald recently, 2 whistleblowers from the End of Life Review Committee have shared deeply worrying issues. This includes one patient who didn't speak English being assessed and approved for death without an interpreter present. Other matters raised contain reports given to the committee, which did not include such information as a patient's diagnosis or prognosis. The committee also asked for information about when the lethal drugs were administered and how long after did the patients die, but access to this information was denied. Both whistleblowers, one a palliative care specialist, the other an ethicist, were inaugural members of the committee. But after having raised concerns during their tenure, one had their application to stay as part of the committee declined by the Ministry of Health and the Minister responsible, David Seymour. The other decided to step down due to what they'd uncovered. So what do you think this action says? Firstly, to the committee members who are there to ensure no one is slipping through the cracks, but secondly, to the healthcare workers who become involved in the process when their patient inquires about euthanasia. Well, it seems that committee members have been sent a strong message. Be supportive or run the risk that you'll be given the boot. As I'm sure you can see, this clearly undermines their role as a committee. And then for healthcare workers, they obviously don't not have clear enough direction of what must be documented and the process to follow. Plus the fact that no one seems to be held to account for mistakes made during the process. So how can effective changes be made to the euthanasia process without scrutiny and then education? It sends chills down my spine to think that a non-English speaking person was assessed and approved for euthanasia without the use of an interpreter. The worst part is that even with this chaos going on right now, the ACT Party have lodged a members' bill to change our current laws so more people become eligible to be euthanised. They intend to drop the criteria that the patient should only have 6 months or less to live, meaning no time limit is required for mortality. This would make New Zealand laws similar to what is seen in Canada. Well, here's a glimpse into the future. This next video features excerpts from a BBC documentary presented by Liz Carr, which featured a Canadian doctor, who, as you will see, takes great pride and pleasure in being a doctor of death.
Hello.
Thank you for
Nice
seeing
to
me.
meet you.
You too. Should we do hands and whatever? Are we very formal? Or do we not? I don't know.
We don't need to be formal, but we also don't need to touch hands.
Fine, good. So you do this work actually here sometimes?
Most people want to die in their own homes.
Yeah.
And so I would be in their home. And of course, many people are in hospital, in hospice, in care homes. And then there are people who don't feel comfortable dying at home. For example, they don't want their spouse to have to deal with their memory of them dying in their home. So then they come here, and this is a recliner. And so people recline here, and they can snuggle up with their loved ones if they want. And so it's good place for some people. Mm-hmm. This is the one that has to be signed in front of an independent witness. And
who would that be
It has to be somebody who is not in the will and not a direct caregiver like me.
Could your receptionist or...
Yes, because they're not directly involved in care.
How many maid deaths have you been involved with?
Over 400.
That sounds like a lot. Is that what you do now? Is that
No, I still run a contraception and abortion clinic in addition to my maid work.
Would you ever say no?
Of course, I have. Oh, yes. I mean, we have a law, and I obey this law. And so there are people who are not eligible under the law. Now, there are the situations where I might find somebody not eligible or eligible when another person won't because of the way our law is written. They desperately want control. Like they want to say it's now. And we say, okay, well, I can get back here at 7 o'clock. Is that okay? And they'll say yes, and they'll be so grateful that they can skip the last 2 days of their life. And I look at it and think, what you really needed was some more drugs, but you want my drugs, I'll give them to you.
Apart from the fact I don't have the desire, I think probably I would be eligible under the Canadian law.
Well, you'd have to be suffering unbearably, and you'd have to convince me that you were suffering unbearably.
And from what you've said, don't worry, I know you're not going to do anything here now. I'm not scared. Yeah, I'm not scared.
So, Liz, right now, you love life and you want to live. But there's lots of nasty illnesses you might get.
Yeah.
Some points to consider after watching that video. She's euthanized more than 400 people, and she also has her side gig, it seems, which includes aborting babies in the womb. She proudly says that she approves eligibility of some people who would be found ineligible by another reasonably qualified doctor. She also gets the receptionist to witness the signing of the euthanasia document. And did you see her excitement when she talks about taking the life of a patient? All done within the laws of Canada. As you can see here, 65% of eligible voters in New Zealand during the 2020 referendum on euthanasia supported the End of Life Choice Act coming into force. For those who support euthanasia, are you okay with becoming like Canada? You saw it. Is that acceptable to you? Would you send a loved one to that type of doctor? Do you think that it's compassion and death with dignity? Or is it simply someone killing other human beings and getting away with it because she's shielded by the law? Every creature has a natural instinct to survive. Life is precious and cannot be simply thrown away despite the pain we may be going through. Just as you received life naturally, you should also receive death naturally. Think about it. How can you celebrate the birth of a newborn baby, whether it be your own or a friend's or a family member's baby, and then in the next breath proclaim how great abortion or euthanasia is and how it's a human right? It is totally contradictory. There are other ways. For example, it is the goal of each palliative care doctor to minimise suffering during the last moments of their patient's natural life. Now, that is true compassion and dignity. We cannot let the slippery slope of assisted suicide to advance in our country. While many seem hell-bent on destroying creation and natural moral goods, it's now time for us to stand strong for life. For more on this issue, tune in to the McBlog episode released this week. Another form of attacking creation and natural moral goods is covered in our next story as well. In the last week, the New Zealand government has demanded a crackdown on how transgender people participate in sports. Sport and Recreation Minister Chris Bishop has asked Sport NZ to review and update its guidelines on the issue. He says the current guidelines do not reflect legitimate community expectations and should prioritise fairness and safety. The question is, how far will Sport NZ go? Now, the appropriate response is to simply categorise sport players by their sex at birth, so that females compete with females and males compete with males. Sport NZ CEO is Raylene Castle. To refresh your memory, she led Rugby Australia in 2019 and spearheaded the attack on Israel Folau when he posted a quote from the Bible on his social media. She terminated his contract for that. Raylene Castle will lead the review, and we hope that it will bring about the change desired by the government as well as many of the New Zealand public, who are not happy that biological men can compete in women's sports. But we're not holding our breath. And given that just on the Family First Facebook page, our article received nearly 250 comments and nearly 350 reactions in only a few days, it shows that this is a hot-button topic that you cannot simply ignore. And it's not only in New Zealand that the heat is being turned up on this issue. Pro-woman apparel company XXXY Athletics has released a viral new video celebrating October 10 as Real Women's Day and calling on Nike to stand up for women and girls in sports. Check it out.
Dear Nike.
Dear Nike.
Dear Nike. Why won't you stand up for me?
Why won't you stand up for me? Why won't you?
Why do you claim to support women and girls?
Yet when we need you most,
You remain silent.
Today, males are claiming our identity.
Our sports,
Our spaces.
men and boys are stealing opportunities, medals,
trophies,
and our future.
And it's not fair or just.
In fact, it's often dangerous. Yet you refuse to use your platform to stand up.
You say you're for social justice and progress.
so why do you allow men's rights to
Come before ours.
see with a big platform?
Comes an even bigger responsibility.
You have a chance to do the right thing, not just do the easy thing.
So we're asking you, Nike.
So we're asking you, Nike,
So we're asking you, Nike.
as the biggest voice in all of sports,
Will you stand up for me? Will you stand up for me?
Will you stand up for me?
will you stand up for me? Will you?
Will you?
Will you just do it?
And what about Sport NZ? Good question for them as well, isn't it? Will they stand up for women and girls? Will they bring about the fairness and safety which is being demanded by the government and so many of you? I look forward to bringing you the answer in a few months when the review is set to be completed. In the meantime, continue to let your voices be heard on this matter. A recently released study out of the US shows that cannabis use has a huge effect on the educational outcomes of young people. US medical journal JAMA Pediatrics found that marijuana use resulted in 39% higher likelihood of earning lower school grades, 50% reduced likelihood of earning a high school diploma, 28% lower likelihood of attending college or university, 31% lower likelihood of earning a college or university degree, more than twice the likelihood of dropping out of high school, and more than twice the likelihood of school absenteeism. The study was a meta-analysis of 63 studies that included more than 400,000 individuals. The study's authors explained that with a growing number of countries and most US states legalising medical and/or recreational cannabis, there is a trend of increased cannabis consumption coincident to decreased risk perceptions of its harms. This raises critical concerns about its potential negative impact, particularly on young people. The study also warned that effective interventions to prevent early cannabis exposure are urgently needed. However, the legalisation and normalisation of marijuana threatens to take the USA in the opposite direction. The authors pleaded that we must protect the well-being of our youth and prevent the long-term consequences of early drug exposure. In New Zealand, while cannabis still remains illegal to possess or cultivate, we have seen growing prescription rates for medicinal cannabis. In 2020, the medicinal cannabis scheme came into force to manage the law change which made it legal to use the drug for medicinal purposes. In figures obtained by the New Zealand Herald, it shows that prescriptions have more than tripled since the scheme began. In 2021, 9,401 people were being prescribed cannabis. That compared with 35,359 people in 2023. Meanwhile, there are already a few cannabis consumption lounges in New Zealand, where members of the public can enter the premise and smoke dope. The latest opening in Hastings. While they are claimed to be for medicinal cannabis users only, I wonder how strict they are on vetting those who enter their business. As documented in the study, numerous states in the US are already seeing some of the effects of the slippery slope of legalising marijuana use. And again, it affects our young people the most. Now to a few headlines. The Disinformation project has announced that it is closing. The group, while initially professing to be a source of unbiased truth, has shown its true colours in a closing announcement on its website. Here's an excerpt. When we started the project in 2020, our focus was on the COVID-19 pandemic and how false information contributed to people's responses to public health interventions. Since then, we have charted the descent of many New Zealanders into more extreme conspiratorial beliefs. These include widespread vaccine refusal, climate change denial, opposition to immigration, reductive beliefs around gender, anti-Maori racism and hatred towards LGBTQ+ community. As you can see, there's absolutely no ideological bias there at all. Family First has also covered the closure in this week's McBlog. Take a look.
Well, break open the knitting, Pinterest, home cooking and tradwives. Let out your red-haired and blonde-haired children. The Disinformation project, which is specialised in churning out disinformation with taxpayers' funding thanks to Jacinda Ardern, has died from natural causes. Everyone thinks they're raving mad. And in preparation for this very sad event, I've been asked to share a eulogy at this sombre event. I just hope I don't break out in a cheesy smile or a cackling laugh at the worst possible moments.
So make sure to watch the full episode on our social media sites or on our website, familyfirst.nz. Evidence is growing that the 2016 Donald Trump, who so courageously defended the unborn, has now totally flipped the script. With the US election next month, the former president is distancing himself more and more from his formerly held anti-abortion stance. You can read more on this by visiting the Family First website. And finally, be sure to tune in to Family Matters this week as Simon O'Connor speaks with Andrea Maralzek, a senior fellow at Cardis, an independent think tank based in Canada, as they discuss marriage and family. Here's a short clip.
What we're doing is basically attempting to somehow speed up childhood, to push children towards school readiness at ages where by rights they should have no school readiness. That shouldn't even be a concept that we're worried about for a 3-year-old, for example.
Thank you for watching PulsePoint. You can check out more on our website, familyfirst.nz. I'm James Williams. See you next week.